Good evening, short story writers. Okay, so this is not today's story prompt, but you know how I say something weird happens every day? Well, I forgot to press record, so I've just been waffling at the screen for perhaps 5 minutes, and that in itself would make a decent story prompt. Somebody thought that they had sent somebody a voicemail apologizing for something, and they were wrong. It never went because, and the whole situation escalates because of a misunderstanding. However, we are tonight continuing this how to write a story, how to plot a story tonight. So previously we decided, or I decided for you, I told you that you've got to have a protagonist and you've got to have an inciting, a bad situation, and maybe an antagonist would help. So what we're going to do is say that you write down the inciting situation, the bad thing that happens, and it doesn't have to be a life or death situation. It can simply be something like irritation or annoyance. Yesterday was the traffic lights going off, and then you write down the ending, which is, in a short story, it's probably best if it's simply a reversal of the situation, maybe with a few changes, but life is kind of back to normal. And then what you need is the middle, and you can then write down up to 3, no more than 3. 3 is the magic number. 3 or fewer things that the protagonist tries to do to reverse the situation. So, if you can write those down, you mostly got your story written. Bear with me. 5 sentences, the whole story, plus a little bit about your protagonist. Yeah, okay, so here goes. I'll possibly have to explain why tomorrow, because we're already 2 minutes in, but we're going to take the example of Patch the dog. Okay, now Patch the dog is a happy little being, and one day, quite by accident, he finds himself out on the street. I don't know. That would be how the situation occurs, and then somebody decides, oh, nice dog, I'll take this home on a whim. But that person turns out to be less than nice. They take the dog home to the far side of town, so Patch does not know where he is. And it turns out that whereas the previous companion, owner, whatever is we're allowed to call people who have dogs as companions these days, this new person is not nice. The first one was a pleasant person, very kind and indulgent towards Patch, whereas this one turns out to be neglectful and cruel. So Patch wants to go home anyway, so he tries to escape through an open door, but the new owner grabs him, and that's attempt number 1 to overcome the situation. Pushes him back inside, closes the door. Attempt number 2 is Patch going to the door and just howling, and the new owner has had enough of this, so he is cruel to the dog, beats it, and chains it up instead of leaving it to go free, and decides he's going to teach the dog a lesson by not giving him any food or drink for 2 days or thereabouts. So Patch, because of the lack of water, almost dies, and to make matters worse, the new owner goes out and, I don't know, is injured in some way. So Patch is left to his own devices, and now he really does start making a noise. Now, you're not allowed in your story to have Deus Ex Machina. Patch cannot be saved apart from early on in the story. That's a rule. You must never break that rule. If Patch is saved at the end, that is Deus Ex Machina, as in the gods intervened to save the situation, and that means that the hero, the protagonist, did not reverse the situation through his or her own efforts. That is the unbreakable law of storytelling. You must always have the protagonist be triumphant, even if they end up dead through their own efforts. They cannot be rescued. So what does Patch do? He's chained up, and then suddenly he hears a noise next door. So instead of howling and yowling, he begins to bark, 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 knowing that from past experience that his barking will annoy people and that they will call the police. He knows this because he does. Maybe in the past this happened and somebody called the police and he was nearly impounded, and therefore he was only rescued by his owner who went to go and get him. So he knows this, past experience. We're allowed to give the dog a certain amount of smarts. He does this. He nearly wears himself out. He exhausts himself with all the barking. His voice is, his throat is hoarse. And from the dog's point of view, he thinks, okay, I've had enough now. And believe me, I know that my next door neighbour had a little puppy, and the puppy went on and on and on and on and on, because they thought he was old enough to be left on his own, and he was still a little puppy, and he was very, very sad. So and the neighbour was with his brother, so I had to in the end go knock on the door and say, look, the puppy's a little sad. I mean, I didn't mind the noise because it was just stuff that puppies do, but I do know that this puppy didn't run out of please come and rescue me. So it would take a long, long time. So in the end, a neighbour... Gosh, I'm writing about my own story, aren't I? It just suddenly occurred to me. I thought I was basing this from, I think it was A Long Way Home. It was a film I saw about 18 months ago. But just using it to illustrate how protagonists don't need to be human. So in the end, somebody came through the dog's efforts. But in your story, to get a little bit of extra pathos in, because he'd not eaten for a couple of days and he's out of water as well. So he's just about to give up when the doors opened magically by, I don't know, the caretaker, the janitor, or someone, along with a police person or a neighbourhood watch person. And there the dog is discovered. The kidnapper is charged with something, and there's a tag still around the dog's neck. So Patch is reunited with his owner, which is what he wanted. Okay, so I've told you the story basically, kind of off the top of my head, but the point is you would start with 3 lines. So tries to escape through the door, tries whining and is punished, and then the third attempt is barking. Okay, not the best story in the universe. However, you got the 3 lines. Now, why 3 lines? Well, you got those 3 lines, the 3 efforts, and you got the beginning line and the end line, and that is where editing comes in. I always find that if I write some lines, then I can start to edit them, and I'm not too great at thinking up stories, but one thing I do like is editing. And once editing becomes expanding and writing, turning one sentence into 2 or 3 sentences, that's how the story grows. We'll look at that a bit more tomorrow. And what did we start with? We started with, well, you could use the puppy, but we started with life is full of surprises. I thought I had hit record and I hadn't. And if you want to use that as a story prompt, somebody who's trying to get in touch with somebody over a delicate situation, they think that they've sent them a message. They actually haven't. It's still there. It never got sent, but a misunderstanding arises. Start with that as the one of the 3 attempts to remedy the situation. The situation would be that an unpleasantness has come between these 2 people, and the end situation would be the opposite of that. That unpleasantness is resolved, and while they may not be living happily ever after, there at least is a best a reconciliation and forgiveness, at the minimum, and an easy truce. Okay, or you can go back to any of the story prompts I've given you over the last 2 months. So like, subscribe and all that stuff if you think this is useful, and I'll see you tomorrow while we talk about editing.